vulnerability in entrepreneurship.
Oh my God. I truly do not feel that it is a bigger topic of conversation,
Yeah.
especially amongst women.
Yeah. Well, there's perfectionism,
Yes.
spending money, offering things and wondering if people are going to want them, like time management. There's a lot.
And just the real struggle behind it, because
So
I think it's
much.
so
Yeah.
glamorized, right?
Right.
Like it looks,
No,
like you come
I've
in.
literally been doing all of it. And people are like, oh, you're like so relaxed. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like,
Yeah.
this is nuts.
I mean, it's interesting to hear you say, because you are someone I've truly admired and
Oh,
just
thank you.
for real. And I remember the moment vividly when I first heard you speak, and it was very empowering. And
Oh,
I've left feeling empowered in myself as a woman.
thank you for
And
that.
I really mean that.
Thank you. It's really nice to hear. I think I'm in menopause and going through this also inflection point in my life. I saw something on the internet today that said something. It's not like you're lost. It's just your old self isn't the same and your new self hasn't fully arrived. And I was like, oh, we
Mm.
go through these inflection points, right? Whether it's into puberty, into motherhood, into menopause, going through inflections as entrepreneurs. And sometimes it's just helpful to have those reflections back of like, oh, right, I do have this sometimes.
That's so endearing to hear from you,
No.
because I think you look at someone like yourself who's just so accomplished and
Mm,
grounded and confident in yourself,
thank
and
you.
have done such impactful work,
Mm,
especially when it comes to just women's health and us like winning back our own strength.
thank you. You know what it is? I think there's a, maybe it stops. I think for me, it's getting quieter, but that sense of perfectionism that can drive that feeling of like, never doing enough, not quite accomplished enough, seeing some of the magnitude of issues in the world and feeling like there is more to do. So just remembering to have gratitude. It's so funny. I signed a book contract 2 days ago, and it was a huge book contract. And that morning, we had all this set up with a landscaper to get started. It's like champagne problems, but the landscaper at the last minute, and we have 7 cubic yards, which is it's a dump truck load of soil in our driveway because this landscaper was supposed to start. Literally ran into my husband at a cafe, said, oh, by the way, I'm not starting today. And it led to kind of a series of things that weren't coming together. And I was like, what is wrong? Why are these things happening? Like, what did I do something wrong? And it was like, no, of course not. And I realized how easy it was to focus on the things that were going wrong with this silly problem of landscaping and not actually have stopped to celebrate that I signed a book contract. And it was like, how like you can look at the one review in the 1,000 good ones. And I think as women, we go toward that doubt part.
Right, because we want to please people.
Yeah.
And it hurts when you have someone say negative things
Yeah.
about you. I think when you're also so passionate
Yes.
about what you do,
And
like,
you want to help, and someone's like, yeah.
and people have very strong opinions I mean, even for myself, I always try to avoid consuming
Hmm.
that stuff, because for the most part, I feel like I've grown really thick skin where I
Yeah.
don't let it in. But every now and then,
Yeah.
there's that one thing.
I don't look, but sometimes something will seep through somehow. And I'm just
Same.
like, oh,
My friend, like a friend will say, will tell me, and I have let myself feel the feelings
hmm,
instead of just, because I think it almost makes you be like, oh, well, I'll show you. And I'm like,
yeah.
no, because it doesn't matter
Right.
what I do.
That's what I all
This
think.
isn't
Like,
for you.
right, exactly. That's what I've come to realize is like, if it's not for you, I'm building the community and audience. And I don't want to say audience, but like the community that is organic for me. Yeah. But I
Right.
also try to listen to and say, like, okay, is there some nugget in there that I can learn from? But usually it's like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's because it's all about delivery,
Hmm.
because we only, I think we're only able to receive things on a level of the way it's delivered. And a lot
Mhm.
of the time when it's in a negative context,
Yeah.
it's from a place of hate and it
Yes.
jars your system.
Yes. It's all part of being an entrepreneur too, right? It's like we have to be in the social media world to do the work that we do, and so we're inevitably opening ourselves up to kindnesses and sometimes not kindnesses.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun to watch you thriving and growing, and just the transformations that have happened over the past few years have been really remarkable. So,
Thank
congratulations.
you
Yeah.
so much. I really appreciate that. It's, as you know, I think the amount of like real grit and stamina and I think just like this internal drive it takes
Mhm.
to not just start something, but to keep it
Yeah.
going
I was
is
watching a video the other day, and it was just these clips of athletes, like Olympic athletes, NBA players, and you know those moments, like, where you're watching it, like, you watch the Olympic runners, and you can see them with their hands on their hips, and they're just, like, walking around, and it was either clips of somebody, like, actually catching what they were muttering or asking them after what they were thinking as they were about to do this thing of a lifetime that they've been preparing for,
mm,
and the inner pep talks were so powerful. I was like, "Oh, right, embracing the mind of an athlete is really powerful." And those moments where we think we can't go on and knowing when you need the break, just
mm,
like, physical activity, knowing when you actually do need the break or knowing when it's like, "Okay, this is hard and I can do hard things."
you really can't.
It does take grit, though. It's much more than people have any. I heard an entrepreneur works 80 hours for themselves to not work 40 hours for someone else,
That is a
but 80
fact.
is like an understatement.
It's just it
Mhm.
doesn't really sleep. I mean, I feel like you learn how to take time away from it, but
Yeah.
even myself recently, I've gotten to this place where I'm like, wow, even things that I do in my free time is for my business. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I need to do things. So like last week and I went out rollerblading because I'm like, this is
Oh, I love it.
this is just for me.
Yeah.
I'm not
I'm taking
doing
2
it.
days off. My birthday's day after tomorrow.
Happy
Yes, and I am
birthday.
taking 2 days off. I just onboarded 2 new teammates, so it's been like a flurry, and I'm like, "Okay, you guys, here's what I've learned. The world does not end if I take time off. Everything just keeps going." Right? There's that part of, like, our own egos too, like, realizing we are important and also we're not so important that we can't take care of ourselves or we're not living our truth. So I'm taking 2 full days off, getting massage, going hiking, doing a little spa time. I'm really excited.
It's so nice. And
Yeah,
you have so much to celebrate.
so
It's
excited.
just like giving that space for things to land
Mhm.
is so important because
Yeah,
it's so easy just to work on the next thing and the next thing. And you
it
just signed a
is.
deal. So,
Yeah. I'm contemplating 2 things recently. One is I work with my partner. My husband and I have worked together
mm,
for a long time. My kids are grown, so they're not in the house, but I see you integrating your husband and family into your work.
mhm,
But because we work together, there's a tendency for us to wake up in the morning and we're like talking about work before the day even starts. And I said, we've been talking about how, like, oh, let's do our planning in the morning. I know what you need to do. You know what I like, or we're each kind of coordinated. And about a week ago, I said, what if we just woke up in the morning and said, what do we need to do to live our best life today? And then figure out how the work fits into it. And I feel like that's applicable whether we're working out of the home or for other people. Just like, what is it that is gonna make this not just about my work efficiency, but about my best life? The other weird thing I've been contemplating lately, and I don't even know where we're going with this interview,
no,
this
I
may be
love
off
it.
topic,
It's
but
beautiful.
is, and I'm assuming we're filming,
Yes,
so
we're
grab it all,
rolling.
is this concept of being ordinary and the cultural pressure for excellence in the form of achievement, right? Like we're still living in a patriarchal world where we've internalized certain standards of achievement, right? Position in our work, money, et cetera, et cetera. And also as women, I mean, we want those things too, right? Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of value to building generational wealth and bringing what we want to the world. But I've also been contemplating, like, what if all the things that we did came out of a place just fully of the love and the passion for it. Because especially in the online world, there's this numbers game always
Mm.
happening subtly. There's likes. I mean, they're like these words, friends on Facebook. It's like these weird words.
Mhm.
And what if excellence and numbers weren't the goal, but just sort of like ordinary bliss
Ugh.
was the goal? And it doesn't mean those things can't still happen. So I've really been thinking about that lately. Like, what does it mean when I go on Instagram to do a post? Is it about getting followers? Is it about getting engagement? Is it about getting anything? Or is
Mm.
it about connecting and communing with my audience and having a conversation? What is it when you're publishing a book? Is it about like what rank you are
Mhm.
somewhere? Or and it can be anything. It doesn't have
Right.
to be these kinds of things. It can be as mothers. Like, what are our goals? To be the best mother? Like, so much pressure like that drives this bestness, this excellence. And like, what if just ordinary was okay? What if small was okay? Like, oh, kind of creates a sense of calm for me on the inside.
You feel like you can breathe.
Mhm.
Well, because seeing everyone's life and what everyone's doing and achieving and wearing and just
I
every
know.
single thing, it makes you naturally go to a place of lack if you're not doing those things or
Yeah.
have those things. And I think it's like bringing it back to the simplistic things that bring you back to that like inner state of joy within
Yes.
yourself.
And service, right? And
Mm.
connection and all the things that are so important to us. Yeah.
I mean, you are just the queen of service and
Oh,
you wear so many hats.
I do wear a lot of
Like
hats.
it's just like
I'm sure you do too.
I
We both
do, but
do.
I mean, you're a midwife, you're a doctor. It's so endless. An
Mhm.
author, you're a podcast host, you have all of these
Yeah.
programs, you've written so many books. Your latest Hormone Intelligence, a an instant New York Times best-selling
Mhm.
book. Like, where do you like, I think with all of these passions,
Mhm.
hone in on your energy
Mhm.
to give to all elements of everything that you do?
Mm. Well, I would say that honestly, in the world at the moment, the way it is with the demands of social media, which I feel like is a beast that you either have to keep feeding or be comfortable in your sort of growth level.
Mhm.
There's so many things. I guess what I'm saying is there's so many things to manage right now with all the moving parts of the way business is as entrepreneurs, that it's the first time I actually am hitting an inflection point where like it's bigger than I can do alone. Because I
Mhm.
write every word of all of my copy across everything, platform, website, all of it, books, everything.
Mm.
That I'm actually learning to seek help and find the help that I need and invest in the help that's really going to add value. I would say though, the energy to give is really from the giving itself. Every time I hear another story from another woman who struggled with 7 years to get an endometriosis diagnosis or had, 3 miscarriages with no support, nobody giving her information, or is in menopause and is being told, "Oh, it's just because you're stressed that you're having all these," whatever it is, to even more like to sometimes life-threatening things that were missed. That is what gives me energy. It's like this fire to really respond to that and find the different ways that I can respond, right? Whether it's video or a book or audio in a podcast for different people who learn different, in different
Mhm.
ways. And then I'm really good at hitting pause. When my kids were little, my youngest is 30 now, believe it or not. So when my kids were little, in some ways, there was a more natural ebb and flow because I had to stop and be with my kids and play with my kids, and I homeschooled my kids, so it was like
Mm.
my work happened at different hours. Um, but now that the kids are grown, it's actually easy to just kind of feel like you can work all the time. It can bleed into everything. So I'm really good at hitting pause, really good at getting good sleep, setting boundaries around my time, knowing when I'm hitting that point. It's like before we cross over the Rubicon of like, that's when my patients call me and have the autoimmune conditions because they're burning the candle at at both ends for so long. And seeing those stories also, it's like, okay, I need to hit pause long before I'm feeling the burn like that. And that's helpful. And it is, as you were saying, some of the simple things and the basics, it really is keeping my blood sugar balanced. That's been a commitment of mine for decades. Again, getting the sleep I can, really spending time in nature, movement, connecting with other women is huge. I have men friends too, but
Mm,
really connecting with other women is really important to me. And those kind of all help set the pace.
mm. The blood sugar
Oh, yeah.
conversation around women's health and hormone health,
Yeah.
it's been something that has like it quickly helps regulate
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Can you share and really dive in more about hormones? I feel like it's this topic that we're
Yeah.
hearing so much about, but it feels gray for
Mhm.
me. And you posted something, and it was just the other day, and you said it was about 9-year-old
Yeah.
girls getting their
Yes.
period, which is
8-year-olds
so
even.
common.
Yes.
My friend's daughter, like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
like, why is that happening?
Yeah.
Why is that alarming? What are the signals that we need to really look out for? Because I know for myself, turning 40 for me, wow, do things change? And I feel like
Mhm.
people tell you that, but I've had to really understand more
Mhm.
about why I was feeling this way and
Yeah.
really shift things in my life to feel more regulated across the
Mhm.
board.
Yeah, what were some of the things you felt like
I think
changed
the
and had to
blood
shift?
sugar,
Yeah.
avoiding caffeine on
Mhm.
an empty stomach,
Mhm.
understanding so much more about my cycle, the phases of the cycle, and take certain supplementation. I am adding more seeds to my smoothie, different things to my
Yeah.
diet, and I feel more regulated, more
Yeah. Yeah.
balanced. But to me, it's this constant, just like curiosity for like what else. Like
Yeah.
it's empowering, right? To
Yes.
know that to put the power back in our hands and
Absolutely.
not feel like we have to jump to. And I want you to talk on this too about like resorting to medication. I'd love your viewpoint on it, right? Because I think
Yeah.
we're fed one way,
Yeah.
and there's so many alternative
Yeah.
approaches.
Well, this is how I love all these questions.
I know
This is
you
a
do.
great conversation. Okay. So, do you remember or did you ever play that game telephone when you were a kid?
Hmm.
Right? So you sit in a circle and the first person says something, right? For like people who don't know this game. The first person whispers something to the next person and the next person and the next person until it gets all the way back around to the last person before the person who started talking. And by the end, what happens?
It's a mess.
Yeah, like it doesn't sound anything like what it
Right.
started out as. And so the message is garbled. It's not the same communication. So hormones literally from a medical scientific perspective, medical school 101, what you're taught is hormones are chemical messengers. That's what they are. And I feel like in our world that we live in and why we're seeing so many women with so many hormone related problems. And keep in mind, thyroid is hormone, insulin is hormone,
Mm,
ghrelin and leptin, which regulate fullness and appetite, are hormones. Cortisol is a hormone, like all the things we hear about online, right? Of these different things affecting women's health. So it's not just estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, which women have, and it's important for our drive and
mhm,
energy, but it's all these hormones. And there's so many factors in our environment. So the big ones that I focus on are endocrine disruptors, like the 80,000 chemicals, individual chemicals that have been released into our environment. And that doesn't even include what they're doing when they bind and bond to each other and interact and then enter our bodies. And hormones, when we think about like estrogen or progesterone, these things are measured in like parts per million. And when you think about an endocrine disruptor, let's talk about like PFAS, these forever
mm,
chemicals that are in everything, plastics, like everything. One drop in an Olympic swimming pool. Imagine like one drop of blue dye in an Olympic swimming pool. Like you wouldn't see it, you wouldn't
mhm,
know it, but it's there. And that's how endocrine disruptors are. They're like one drop in parts per million, but they still bind and change how our hormones are working. So they change how our thyroid hormone works or our thyroid works. They change how estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, thyroid, huge endocrine disruptor exposure. And so I'd say like that's one of the things that is interfering with the messages. So we play telephone and we start out with this pure message.
Right.
Then there's the endocrine disruptor that's in the way. It's disrupting literally by binding and changing the messages or interfering with them in some way. Then you go on, here's another one, gut health. So by the time the average woman in the United States is 18 years old, she's had 20 rounds of antibiotics, not 20 doses, 20 rounds. So 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. Then in our 20s, we get as many as 10 more rounds for things like urinary tract infections that we get in our 20s. So you add that gut health disruption, microbiome disruption. We have an entire department, if you will, of microbiome in our gut called the estrobolome. Its entire job is to process, bind, and eliminate estrogen or help us reabsorb estrogen. So when our gut disruption is off, it's not just our estrogen that's off, but that can go really off. But it communicates with our liver, it communicates with our thyroid. So there's a lot of disruption. We even have microbiome in our breast that our gut microbiome actually communicates with, and maybe one of the underpinnings of certain types of breast cancer. Like it's nuts when
I
we
did
think about.
not know that.
Yeah, the interconnection is so powerful. So we've got endocrine disruption, we've got gut disruption, we've got diet, right? Just
Mm.
let's start off with standard American diet, but then all the passengers that come with that, herbicides, pesticides, plastics that our food is in. So we're back to the endocrine disruptors. We're getting ultra processed foods, we're getting inflammatory foods. And then we're also like the average American woman goes into pregnancy deficient or insufficient in like 15 different nutrients. We know that as women with heavy periods, we're deficient in iron. All of those things affect whether our hormones are being, able to be made properly and function properly. Then there's sleep. Stress is actually considered an environmental toxin. Like there are departments of universities looking at stress as an environmental toxin. And, the list goes on.
Mm.
So when you think about that game of telephone and all of those, like your hormones being passed through all of those filters, then by the time it gets back to the hormone receptor in your body that it's supposed to act on and do the work of, the message is confused.
Mm.
And that is what is happening. And the thing is, our girls are being exposed to these things from
Even in our
before they're even
products, right?
born. Yeah. And like even when we're pregnant, all the environment, like it's stressful to think about
Beauty products,
beauty
like
products,
home care
plastic water
products,
bottles,
it's
perfumes, like
perfume.
even just thinking about like the candle industry, the scent industry, getting in an Uber, working in an Uber. There's so many points of interruption. And then also there's this phenomenon that is known as evolutionary mismatch. It's a evolutionary biology term. And what it means is that we've lived on this planet for, XYZ hundreds of thousands of years. And our bodies have evolved. Our liver detoxification systems have evolved. Our blood sugar and metabolism have evolved. All of these things our stress decompression systems have evolved,
Mm.
our adrenal stress access to be able to cope with the world as it's been for a very long time. And in the last 70 years, we've seen this introduction of endocrine disruptors, levels of environmental stress. Like all these factors have actually happened in just less than a century.
Mm.
And so there's this mismatch between what our bodies are intended to do and the overload that's being put on us. And at the same time, the undernourishment, the lack of sleep, relaxation, all the food nourishment we need, sedentary lifestyle. So that's this mismatch.
What is the first thing you would say to someone who's listening and is like, "Ooh, I
I
feel like
know.
something is off." Like, what
Mm,
is step 1? How do you
yeah.
proceed in a way that's not overwhelming? Because then I
Hmm.
think that's how most people feel. It
Yes.
feels
I
overwhelming
know.
and
I
you're
even am so like that's why in hormone intelligence
yeah,
I break it down.
yeah,
Like this sounds like a lot,
right.
but when we unpack it, it really is just back to the basics that we all have
What are the
access to.
basics?
Good, stress decompression, sleep, good healthy food, even if it's not organic, but really whole unprocessed foods as much as possible.
Mm.
Keeping our blood sugar steady, spending time with people we love, doing things we enjoy. We forget laughter, we forget pleasure
Mhm.
as really important parts of our health. movement. And I tend to lean away from the word exercise because I think it's sounds like a not good 4-letter word, but it's way more letters. And it stresses people out, right? But to think about
Mm.
how do you love to move your body? Like I have a weighted hula hoop and a jump rope. Love. So much fun. It's
So
like, because I
fun.
feel like I'm a kid and I can put on, boy band punk music and like jump rope or hula hoop. And that is my pleasure. And it's actually great exercise, right?
Mm.
So I think of that as movement. Those are just some basics.
Mhm.
And I would say back to what we were talking about earlier about blood sugar, if women could learn to not get hangry, not get hungry, and learn which foods keep us in a steady state,
Mhm.
because how we feel is a reflection of how our hormones are doing, all of those hormones I mentioned. And how our hormones are doing is going to affect how we feel. So if we want to get out of the vicious cycle, we want to get in a blood sugar balance cycle. But I want to just add, because you said, what's the first thing women should do if they're feeling off? The absolute first thing to do is actually trust yourself, right? To realize, okay, I'm not feeling how I want to feel
Mm.
or how I kind of think I should feel, not based on some Instagram feed where everybody looks like they're just like in the modern version of Baywatch, right? But like, how do you really feel and how do you want to feel?
Mm.
And those are two questions that I literally I ask my patients at their first visit. How do you feel? How do you want to feel? And then we look at like what's realistic, right? If you want to feel like perfect every minute of the day, I'm like, no, life has ebbs and flows. Cycles have ebbs and flows. But trusting, okay, I'm not feeling my best. And then figuring out what sources you can trust for information. Sometimes we've just been having heavy periods or not nourished well, and it may be something as simple as like your iron is a little low or your vitamin D is a little low, and so you're getting sick a lot or both are low. There's sometimes just like super simple fixes that we can do without having to like mega supplement and change our diets and go crazy on all the things. And so finding a healthcare provider that you can at least resonate with
Mm.
enough and trust enough and say, okay, this is how I'm feeling. Look, if they're gaslighting you, find another provider or bring someone with you that you trust who's going to kind of bear witness. And physicians act better when there's a witness in the room, basically, when you have an advocate. Go with your questions written out ahead of time so you don't get nervous or overridden by the agenda of the appointment. And just like, this is how I'm feeling. I was not feeling this way before, or I've always felt this way, but I don't feel like I should be feeling this way. And so, can you help me sort it out? Can we do some basic blood work? Look at my nutrition, look at my thyroid levels. And so that's where I would start. Trust yourself, find resources you trust, and then go from there. It can be really hard to find practitioners who can give you both the conventional answers you need in a balanced, non-judgmental way and also the integrative. And sometimes it's hard to find the integrative who gives you the balanced,
Mm.
right? So finding someone in the middle can really make a difference. And then just get educated from resources that you feel like aren't making crazy big promises. But again, you trust the information and start with really simple things. So blood sugar balance, let's just talk about it. I'm sure you said you've had to really learn to work with it. For me, I learned when I was pregnant with my first, like really what feeling fully blood sugar balanced was like, okay, I need to eat protein, good quality fat, keep my energy up. And it was like night and day from the years before where I'm like, go, 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 skip a meal. I was never a coffee drinker, but like suddenly find myself in that blood sugar drop. So learning for me, that was just huge. And if I stay with it, like I never don't. And I'm 58. I'm turning 58 in 2 days. And I just got my blood work for the first time in a couple of years. It was like, it was perfect. And I was like, this stuff really does actually make a difference. My hemoglobin A1C was great. I wasn't anemic. I'm not a big meat eater, but I do eat meat in my diet. Like, I was like, okay, my cholesterol was great, And I'm not strict or restrictive. It's just living a simple, healthy, balanced life and keeping that blood sugar steady.
Can you share some foods that people should just be mindful of
Yeah,
to avoid those blood sugar spikes? Because I
yeah,
think people have no idea.
yeah. So let's talk about what a blood sugar spike is,
Mhm.
right? If we're having steady energy because we're eating consistently and we're getting, I don't love breaking foods down into sort of nutritionism where we're talking about protein and carbs and fats and micronutrients because it's like, it's food.
Mm.
And I want food to be pleasure and nourishment and all the sensual things
So
and not restriction and not, it should be pleasure. It really should. And within that, we are so raised to think, to associate pleasure with foods that, as I once heard someone say, are a party in our mouth because we're so used to overly sugary tasting or overly salted or overly flavored foods that sometimes a simple meal of like brown rice and some steamed vegetables and chicken's like, well, that doesn't have any flavor. Well, if we're always used to those things that are overly saturated and programmed to make us addicted to them, the simple foods don't actually taste as
mhm.
flavorful. But once you kind of get off of those, even for like a few weeks, you start to realize, oh, there's tremendous pleasure in so many ways to like season and flavor and eat well.
And you
So
taste
you taste the
food
food.
differently.
Yes. So I would say the first thing to really be mindful of are ultra processed foods, sugary foods. Oh, I want to just jump back actually. So when we're eating in that way that keeps our blood sugar steady, which is getting adequate protein and a good quality fat, some small carbs at some meals, like healthy carbs, that
Mhm.
can be brown rice, quinoa, millet, buckwheat. If you're not gluten intolerant, it can be really good sourdough bread or a good, pasta. It can be and then like lots of fruits and vegetables and rinse and repeat, whether you have 2 meals a day, if you're doing some like, time-based eating or 3 meals a day, which is what I actually tend to lean into,
Same.
keeping that steady. And what's amazing is a lot of the highs and lows that we experience in our lives that we're taught are normal. I feel like really good energy. Then I'm crashing at 10 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon. You realize like that pretty much never ever has to happen. Also, as our blood sugar gets steady, our inflammation goes down. So some of those aches and pains, some of those chronic headaches, the different things that we might experience start to subside. Our gut isn't getting bloated with lots of sugar and our gut symptoms start to clear up. We start to see over not that long a time that the ups and downs and dysregulations that we're experiencing in our hormones start to steady out. And it doesn't mean that when you're premenstrual, you don't notice a little bit of like,
Mhm.
I feel different. I don't really want to go to that party. I actually want to stay home and I do want to watch Netflix or read my book
Yeah.
or do nothing or take a bath. That is like the normal ebb and flow. But when those ebbs and flows are extreme and taking you out of your life or making you uncomfortable or have to take medication, that's not how
Mhm.
we're supposed to experience our bodies. So, blood sugar steadiness starts to level all of that out. So, things to avoid: all the ultra processed food, anything that's like a quick carbohydrate. So, if it's white flour, white processed, I'm not saying never eat it. Like if you're going to your best friend's wedding and they're having like a wedding cake and it's white flour, of course,
Mhm.
unless you're diabetic or something like that, you can't have it. You're celiac. We can enjoy these things in the foundation of like, I call it 95-5. Like if 95% of what you're intaking is like good energy, good information, you can pretty much do whatever you want in the other 5%. Yeah. So
It's so
sugar.
true, by the way, because
Yeah.
I feel like your body just starts to respond to those life
Yeah.
shifts because you become so sensitive to, I mean, for example, I pretty much since I started drinking caffeine have always had caffeine on an empty stomach.
Hmm.
Never bothered me
Yeah.
until like my late 30s and in my 40s. I was like, what happened?
Where you just jangled
I
or,
just my
yeah.
moods were so severe.
Hmm.
My highs were high, my lows were
Hmm.
low. I was so reactive, fiery, like it literally was
Like
like,
agitated.
yes,
Yeah.
so agitated. And I knew
Hmm. So did you start to have it with a meal?
well, first of all, I don't necessarily wake up hungry.
Hmm.
So it's been this like I've had to just train myself to eat
Yeah.
before I'm even hungry.
Yeah.
And then to have, and even shifting to matcha over
Hmm.
coffee,
Yeah.
depending where I'm at in my cycle,
Yes.
interestingly enough,
Yes.
because I can handle it. And organic coffee makes such a difference over
Hmm.
non organic coffee, like little tweaks like
Yeah.
that. But having it after I have my smoothie or
Hmm.
my banana with almond butter. Like
Yeah.
I feel it doesn't even, I don't even like shift. Like I have a little boost of energy, but I
Mhm.
don't get picked up and dropped anymore.
There's some interesting data too, like having coffee at 10 in the morning actually gives you better brain fuel. You get more from your coffee if you are drinking it or any caffeinated
Oh,
beverage. So it kind of is like a good argument. Have your good breakfast. Although there's something about coffee in the morning, right? That's nice too.
so
I never had my first cup of coffee. You're going to not even believe this till I was in my early 40s.
wow.
Never had coffee.
Never had
Never
coffee?
had coffee. Alcohol either. And then my daughter was in a relationship with a barista, and coffee got introduced into our lives. And I've actually come to love it. But yeah, I can't do it on an empty stomach either.
No.
Just no.
And I really do enjoy it.
Yeah.
So, and I find that when I get to that place of like even telling myself, like I'm avoiding it for
Hmm.
30 days, I become
Yeah.
obsessed.
Isn't that funny how our brain does that?
Yes.
It's
And
like the
I'm like,
elephant in the room.
I'm just like, stop doing
Yeah.
that. And just like right now, it's truly this dance of like really tapping, like waking up, like whenever I have days where I'm doing the podcast, I'm like, it is a matcha morning without a
Uh-huh. Yeah.
doubt. When my days are really full, matcha. And then on the weekend, I can have a latte
Yeah, that's how I
with
feel like,
some
oh, a
food.
Sunday morning is a
Yeah.
nice time. It's really interesting. I think there's so many evolutions of our lives as women, right? So just knowing for me, I'm the same. Like if I'm having a really intense day where I'm going to be seeing a lot of patients, I'm going to be speaking, doing some events that require a lot of emotional or just energy output,
Hmm.
I have got to start my day early, 2 eggs, piece of toast with some nut butter. Like I know I need to fuel up on protein and good fat. If I'm having a more relaxed morning, I might have like a 10 o'clock breakfast that day. And
Hmm.
that works for me too, because there's so much out there like, oh, if you wake up not hungry, there's something wrong with your
I've heard that by
cortisol.
the way.
And
Someone actually, yeah,
that
has.
is not universally, it can be true, but is mostly not universally true. Sugar is a really interesting one. So sugar, we've talked about processed food, coffee. Sugar and alcohol are both really interesting. I think they have a tremendous impact not only on our biology, blood sugar, hormones, and these are like well documented in the literature, like just how significant the impact of alcohol is on women's hormones at various stages of our life cycles
Hmm.
and at various stages of our menstrual cycles. But they just really affect our mood. And so when we talk about like creating steady state, steady energy, and it doesn't mean like we don't get, I'm like a New Yorker. I talk with my hands, I drop F bombs, I get emotional. Like, I'm not talking about like being like la 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 la
Yeah,
la
no,
all the
no,
time,
that's not happening.
but feeling like we have a little bit more, we spin out less far, we come back fast, faster, like have
Yes.
more of a center. Alcohol just feels like it just jacks up our moods. It affects our sleep. It drops us down. It's a depressant.
Mm.
Right? Like I don't really know very many women who have a drink or two and then the next morning feel great. They're like, I'm raring to go. Like they feel puffy and a little blue. Same with sugar. It feels great while it tastes great while we're eating it. And we get that little quick energy, just like with alcohol. We get that little like disinhibition and we feel relaxed.
Hmm.
But then 3 hours later, we're crashing, we're tired, we're irritable, we're hangry. And toward what you're saying, Mike, you know who Michael Pollan is.
I
So
love Michael
yeah,
Pollan.
he wrote this book called The Botany of Desire. It was one of his first books. And it's really fascinating to me what you were saying about how when you're going to quit coffee, your brain becomes obsessed with it. And you're like, even for 30 days. So Michael Pollan's book, Botany of Desire, was about how plants and molecules are in some ways ingeniously designed to make us want them so that we keep ingesting them and we keep replanting them and they keep repopulating. So the entire book was about things like apples having seeds that animals eat or we eat because we're animals too.
Hmm.
And we end up eating some of the seeds and then we end up pooping the seeds out. And it's sort of like nature's ingenious way of getting us to want things or to get habituated to things. And when I think about that, I think about coffee, right? It is addictive. It does make us feel good. And I'm not actually anti coffee because actually studies show for people in their 50s and beyond, it can be a phenomenal cognitive stimulant. So 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day can actually be part of preventing brain fog, staving off depression, staving off Alzheimer's, and even for younger people. It can be a great antidepressant. We think of like all the people on antidepressants. If you're sleeping and you're tolerating it well and your gut is good, I think it's
That
fine.
makes me so happy.
Yeah. And so when I think about that 30, like your brain, like screaming for it, I think we just have to remember, like kind of remind ourselves it's hard, but like, of course, because the plant is making me want to have more of it.
Mm,
And you can just say a little nice offering to the plant, like, I'll come back to you when the time is right. Thank you so much. But I'm not going to partake right now. And then we're just resetting the thought process. And weirdly, it can actually help us to calm that screaming call for it.
that's what I do now.
Mhm.
Like whenever I actually wanted it this morning. I had a funny night of sleep with my daughter last
Oh,
night. And I was like, okay, I know that I have these internal conversations
yeah.
with myself because it helps me kind of work through it.
Mhm.
But I was like, I really want that right now, but I know it's
Yes.
not the best decision in this moment. It doesn't mean that I can't have it. And funny enough, I didn't have it today. Like sometimes you just, when you really lean into what your body is
Yeah.
intuitively telling
Yeah.
you and listen.
Listen, it's just
Ah,
getting quiet enough. And it comes back to that question that I was saying I ask my patients is, how do you feel? And how do you really want to feel? And I'll sometimes just say to myself, well, do I really want to feel how that is going to make me feel later? So I didn't have any alcohol till I was in my early, like literally had not had a drink. I remember my first drink. I was like 40. I was out at a restaurant with the woman who was my ride or die best friend. And we ordered mojitos and it was like, oh, wow, this is really nice. And there is that like pleasant, relaxing feeling, but not a big drinker. But with menopause, forget it. It was
mhm,
like, if I were to drink a half a glass of white wine, I'm going to wake up at 2 in the morning. And at first I'd be like, oh, it's probably not going to happen again. And then it would happen. And now it's just like, I have friends who are social drinkers, we have dinner. And I'm like, you so much. I just like, I'll tell myself, like, do I really want to wake up in the middle of the night tonight? I'm like, no. Do I really want to feel puffy and irritable or blue tomorrow? No. Is this actually worth it? I'm
mm.
like, no.
That's what led me to taking this true like inner experiment with self 4.5, it will be 5 years this year that I have been living life without alcohol.
Hmm.
I don't call myself sober. It's just
Yeah,
a
you just don't drink.
choice. I just don't
Like, yeah,
drink.
it's not a thing.
But it was through really paying attention to how I felt after I
Hmm.
drank, because I think it's so easy to connect with how you feel when you drink,
Yeah.
right? But it was like the next day, even the day after, because as you get older, right, it's harder for your body to recover and repair
Yes.
and to just like there's no bouncing or jumping back anywhere
Yeah.
but back in bed when you're in that state. And I just there was just something deep inside me. I was like, I just need to get really centered, really clear.
Yeah.
Let me just experiment taking the next 30 days and not drinking. And it was, I mean, I think of anything that I've chosen to move away from, I don't think that my life would be where it is today. I truly
Yeah.
mean that with, and not just from a business sense, from just like my own relationship with self,
Hmm.
my relationship with my husband, my friends, my family. I There's a different connectedness and clarity that I feel,
Yes.
and it's just made me never look back. It was never this like feeling of
Like you missed something.
no,
Yeah.
like cutting it out and like people are
Hmm.
like, is it so hard? I'm like, I think when you feel so called to move towards all of the things that make you feel more aligned with your truest self, there's no struggle,
Yeah. Can
right?
we talk about this piece of alcohol a little more with
Yes,
women's health?
please.
Because I'm also wanting to share something that's really important.
Mm,
So, the number of menopausal women in this country is dramatically increasing, and it's beautiful. We're seeing this whole movement happening now. We're also seeing, and this has escalated since COVID, but also is escalating with the number of women in menopause, that the severity of alcohol related issues for women in their 50s and 60s and over is going up. And I didn't even know this until I did a two-part podcast on alcohol and women's health like a year and a half ago. And there was some data that I came across that I didn't even realize. So when we are in perimenopause and menopause, even if we've never been drinkers, our brain creates a desire for alcohol. We actually have a lower threshold of clearing alcohol, and alcohol drinking becomes more pleasurable. So we have these three things. Women are, if you were a drinker, you're tending to want to drink more. If you weren't a drinker, suddenly you might start thinking, oh, that sounds pretty good. I think I'm going to do that. We are feeling more pleasure immediately in the short run from the alcohol, but our tolerance is going down. We're not clearing it as well. And so the risk of over drinking, having an accident, the risk of becoming an alcoholic, even if you've never even drank before, is becoming really significant. So, kind of just, I know it's a little intense, but I want to really highlight that because we've been sold such a bill of goods by the alcohol industry that drinking is actually really good for us. And from a scientific perspective, the only drink that's good for us is no alcohol.
Mm,
And I think you can still enjoy it and like do it smartly and do it pleasurably. But I do think looking at the actual impact of it on our well being is important and really ask, like, how do I feel when I drink that? And why is there another way I can feel some of this way? Or can
thank
I
you.
do it in moderation? Like,
Thank you
really moderation.
for sharing that because I
Yeah.
think it's really important for people to take honest inventory in their
Hmm.
life
Yeah.
and to really let that land.
Yeah.
Because I think, especially I feel like in the motherhood space, it trends so hard to, you know, throw up the glass of wine and be like, it's that. And not that you can't do that.
Yeah, no,
Right. And
I'm
I like
zero
that you
judgment
said
about
that.
all the things, and if it
Same.
brings you pleasure, great, but the honest inventory, I think, is the important
The
piece. Yeah,
honest inventory.
yeah.
And I am so looking forward to hearing more about menopause from you
Okay.
because I know how comfortable you are talking about it. And I also just feel like it needs to become a bigger topic of
Mhm.
conversation amongst women. And we need to know more about perimenopause. Like,
Yeah,
what is that? When is that happening? What happens to our body?
yeah,
Like, what are these things that we should really be knowledgeable about
yeah.
and understand, like, what the hell is happening to
You know what?
us?
It's crazy. I mean,
I don't think people know.
no, well, I mean, here's the thing. I've been a midwife for 40 years. I've been a physician for 15 years, and I started studying women's health, changing my lifestyle. I was 15 years old. I was 16 years old when I started studying midwifery. So I have been doing this work, not just living the lifestyle, but doing this work for a really long time. And I would say that menopause was really, it took me by surprise. And there were a lot of aspects that have taken me by surprise. And I've been pretty fortunate, and I haven't had vaginal dryness. I haven't had significant night sweats or hot flashes or aches and pains, any of like the really disruptive things. Sleep has definitely been a surprise to me. I've been a good sleeper my whole life, but interrupted sleep, like, wow.
Mm.
Well, I'm like living by yoga nidra right now. Like I've got my insight timer and I have no financial relationship insight timer.
No,
I have my
that's
insight
fine.
timer. I have like my bookmarked yoga nidras. And I just delightedly discovered that you can actually, I think this might be a new feature, hit this like repeat button.
Mm,
So I can listen to a 45-minute yoga nidra if I like wake up at 4 in the morning, but I can have it go and repeat at 45. So I've got like 90 minutes. So now I'm sleeping till 5:30 or 6. And I'm like,
mm,
getting a good night's sleep. It's transformative. But what really has shocked me, and this I did not anticipate, was the psychological, emotional, spiritual aspects of becoming an older woman in this culture. Of looking in the mirror and seeing my face change. And again, like alcohol, I mean,
mhm,
Botox, filler,
mhm.
facelifts,
Yeah,
do what makes you feel good,
yeah.
do what keeps you job secure, do what you need to do. It's not felt natural to me to do that. And I'm not saying I would
No, it's
not do
your
those
skin.
things.
I cannot believe.
Oh,
No, I
thank
really,
you.
it's insane.
Thank you. Well, I have changes in my face structure. I have just changes in my body, changes in my hair thickness, things that I did not expect to to think about. Like I've
Mm,
been generally throughout my life not centered on physical appearance. And suddenly I'm like, wow, what does this mean to be on video or to to truly like own it, not say the words, but truly own what it means to be in this different phase of life and to
mm,
reinvent my creativity, reinvent my energy. You don't even realize like how much creative energy is behind ovulation, for example. That is different when you don't have those estrogen and progesterone surges each month that are like, oh, right. And then you kind of have that little decrescendo around your menstrual, your period
mhm,
and your flow, and you're like, okay, a little rest time. And so, like, you're creating new rhythms for yourself. It's really, really profound. And then there's this whole biology. So, I have my oldest daughter's 36. And last year, we went to an outdoor ballet dance event. I live in the Berkshires. We went to Jacob's Pillow and we were ordering some salads before we went to the show at this little outdoor cafe. And there was a gentleman behind the counter serving the salads who I'm guessing was in his mid 60s. My daughter is, I mean, she's beautiful. I mean, every woman is beautiful. She has a certain kind of look that gets attention. And she walked away, and I watched this man's eyes just follow her to the bathroom. And I was kinda like sexually invisible on some level. It was really interesting.
mm,
And there was this moment of like, I mean, of course, I have no envy of my daughter.
mm,
She's exactly where she's supposed to be in her life. But what I realize is that we are producing different pheromones when we're in those fertile years. We're producing different energy that also calls attention to us physically as women. And when we're in those years, we don't always want that attention. We think we don't always want that attention, right? But then there's some validation that sometimes comes with it.
mhm,
And then when it's not there, there is, I think, at first a reckoning with like, oh, I didn't realize I'm getting my validation from part of me being young in a culture that validates youngness. Um, and now I'm like finding new ways of seeing beauty in all of us at different age. Like I always saw that, but now being in it, you have to think about it differently, right? Like, like when you're a teenager, you don't think you're going to be in your 30s, but when you're in your 20s, 30s, even early 40s, it's different to think about being your mother's age or your grandmother's age. And you see the changes in them and it's natural. But then when you see it in yourself, it's like, whoa. And then that's just one aspect of it. I mean, for so many women, the symptoms are really disruptive. The brain fog, the rage. That is one thing I've definitely experienced is like levels of having to really catch myself with my partner. Just like things that would not have set me off before. Like, do you really have to chew and breathe? Do you actually like actually have to chew and breathe? Like,
What if
yeah.
that's happening pre-menopause?
I think it happens at different
It
phases. That's the
does.
thing, right? It's like
Yes.
we start to get inklings of it can happen postpartum. Like, I'm so touched out. Don't
Mm,
touch me. I'm touched out, right?
yes.
It does happen in different phases of our life. So there have been some interesting things, and just the sheer number of women who are struggling with sleep and it really affecting them, or just joint aches and pains, all the things that you don't know estrogen is protecting you from until it starts to wane. So you asked about medication and what I
Mhm,
think about medication and
mhm.
whether that's the pill when we're experiencing things like PMS or PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, or pain with
Endometriosis.
endometriosis, whether it's doing fertility medication or whether it's doing hormone replacement therapy. Like there are lots of inflection points in our life where for some women it's their whole life, right?
Mhm,
Where we're feeling like our bodies are betraying us or in a battle and we're uncomfortable a lot of the time. And I am not anti anything that makes you not suffer unless it's harmful for you, like opioids or over drinking or self medicating.
mm,
Like if it's harming you, then let's find better ways to do it. And certainly there are no pharmaceuticals that are not without risk. So it's all about figuring out what are the discomforts that are just sort of like part of aging finely, right? Like you have that beautiful rocking chair that you've had forever and maybe it's creaking a little bit. Does it really need to be refinished or is it just part of the beauty of it? It's got a patina. Does it need anything or is that just part of the beauty of it? Or like, this is not functional. This is making a noise every time I move, or this is going to break, or something's really wrong here with the mechanism.
Mm.
And so I think it's finding that like all the fine lines between how am I feeling in my body? How am I feeling in my mind? How am I feeling in my life? Am I coping? Are there things that I can do to more than cope, but feel really great and thrive? And are those things within my capacity to do? Do I have the bandwidth, the time, or is it adding more to my to-do list? Now, I would say that if somebody's thinking finding time to eat well is beyond their capacity, we have to really rethink our choices a little bit, right? There are so many different ways to make that within our capacity. And I say that as not someone who's an entrepreneur with grown kids now, but I say that as a mom who homeschooled 4 kids and was in medical school and running a nonprofit and writing a textbook, like literally all at the same time. Like I've been there too and had young kids and also lived on a school teacher and a home birth midwife's budget in a state where midwifery was illegal. So we're talking like low budget, right? With 4 kids. So it can be done. Does it take work? Yes, but it's like pay now or pay later. We can pay
Mhm.
later with our health in big ways. Same with sleep, movement, little bits of self-care, like in the form of meditation or yoga or whatever it is that helps calm us down. I once heard a quote that said, if you have no time, you have no eternity. And I think that's really powerful, right? And listening to our body's little messages and symptoms early on is so important. But if bigger things are not within your bandwidth because you're so depressed
Mm.
that you just can't get up and make the food, you can't get up and go to the yoga class, then you don't have the energy to go figure out what herbs to take or what supplements to take, then yeah, a SSRI or hormone therapy can make all the difference. If you're struggling with PCOS, with severe cystic acne, and you don't have the bandwidth right now to do all the things. There are some things we can do. Like we know that just increasing your protein to like 80 grams a day and adding in HIIT exercise 3 times a week, just that can dramatically reduce PCOS. So like there are things that you can break it down to the sort of
Mhm.
granular, just do these 3 things for each of these different conditions. But, I've had patients who come to me and their cystic acne is keeping them from going to the grocery store or going to the job interview or showing up at grad school. And I'm like, take the birth control pill, get the symptoms settled while we're working on the other things. If menopause is making you miserable and you're waking up 5 times a night with hot flashes and you don't have the bandwidth to do the flaxseed every day and all the things, go ahead and do the hormone replacement therapy or try an SSRI. It doesn't always have to be hormones, but know what your individual risks are and know what the bigger risks are. And that means finding, again, those people you can trust, you can ask the questions to and get the answers that you can feel like you can rely on. And sometimes it's having a few of those people that you
Yeah,
can turn to. Yeah. So I'm not against the pharmaceuticals. I'm just really against them being overprescribed,
right.
prescribed like candy, prescribed like there's nothing else that works, and women being put on them without being told the side effects or put on them and left on them indefinitely. Like how many women go on the pill at 15 and then they're 30 to 35, first trying to get pregnant. And that's the first time they're coming off of it. Or put on hormone replacement therapy and not someone checking with them in 2 years. Like, do you still need it? Are you having abnormal bleeding? Are you having any risks, like signs coming up?
I think it's honestly such a breathable approach that feels it just like you said, if you're someone who is just at like your lowest of lows and you're
Yeah.
depressed, like it is so important to get immediate care. And it may be that SSRI and not to have shame around it.
No shame.
People have so many opinions and very strong opinions, especially
Yeah.
in the holistic, integrative, functional medicine world.
Mhm.
And I've always loved that about you, that it just feels fair. Like, I don't know, like that just is the word that comes up for me. And it's like really meeting yourself where you
Mhm.
are in your life. Like, I'm not, some people may not go do all those other things and all those steps
Yeah.
because they don't have the mental capacity
And
to do
sometimes you
it.
feel better. You just start to feel better. You get out of the dark, you get out of the
Right.
suffering. And now it's like, oh, okay, I do have the energy to start moving every day. I do have
And
the energy to actually make those 2 chicken breasts or saute those tofu cubes or whatever it is that like is going to give me protein or make those eggs or just get out in the sunlight or see my girlfriends. And then you start doing those things and then sometimes you don't need the intervention anymore. And that's where
right.
it's like reevaluating, do I still need this? Can I try to drop my dose down and see if I'm still needing this? And it's powerful. I think wellness can be like conventional medicine is so polarizing, but wellness can be so polarizing too, and so shame and blame. And the other thing too is being on the side of it where I'm actually taking care of people's health as a doctor. Like I'm really in the sandbox and I know what women have time for and bandwidth for. I also know what are unrealistic claims about supplements and which ones you know, yeah, try it. This really works. I also know that there are wonderful people in the wellness space who are in there with such a great mission and such great information, but who are also behind the scenes taking the antidepressant or the thyroid
Hmm.
medication and not disclosing that. So
Right.
you get this, you get this perception of like, oh, how I manage my depression with meditation, but I know that person personally or I'm prescribing something and it's like
Right.
they're on something. And that's really important. But I think it's important for people to disclose that so that the average human being who is coming to our spaces
Mm.
knows that it's a full gamut of things and isn't under the illusion that if I just do all the things she says, I'm going to look, feel, and dress like her. Right.
How freaking important is
Yeah.
that to hear?
Yeah.
I'm just like, thank you for saying it because it's so true. And just the transparency,
Yeah.
like it humanizes all of us and like what works for me and my practice and my habits may not work for someone in
Yeah.
immediate need of um, taking care of their mental health. And it's such a breathable approach.
Well, I just think that and I have to check myself on this too, like, somehow wellness has made us into these never-ending to-do projects or like, we're like our own home improvement project, and that can also be a lot of rules and a lot of to-dos, and the one thing I can say from being in this work for a very long time now is, like, there's also nothing new under the sun that doesn't circulate back around as a fad. And the only thing that doesn't do that is the basic core eat well, get rest, have some fun, spend some time with the people you love. And I don't move, time in
Hmm.
nature. I don't want to undervalue though how important a whole foods, natural based, not ultra processed diet is. And when I say like I don't mean to like sound boasty, oh my blood work was perfect. It's
No,
really
it's
just to me, I was like, "Oh, it's a testimony to" because that's not how my family is, like, it's not like I come from this family with no issues, right? My mom has IBS and thyroid problems. There's heart disease in my family. I'm like, so, it was important for me to check and see how these parameters were. And it's just like, I do think it's a testament to the fact of a certain kind of lifestyle can really prevent, but also reverse so many of these chronic conditions that women are experiencing. I also just like, I want us to be able to feel joy in our bodies, feel ease in our bodies, age well, right? There are
mm,
cultures around the world where people are still living independently on no pharmaceuticals, having sex and taking care of their farms and balancing their bank books into their 90s and hundreds, early hundreds. Whereas, you know, in the United States, half of women over 50 are on at least 2 medications. Many are on more. And we don't have the gift of looking forward to those kind of beautiful, independent years in a culture where half of people end up with a chronic disease.
Mm.
So I want us to like live well for a
Yes.
really long time.
Same. And I think the one thing that I love that you said too is no matter what do with your patients, it's the coming back point and the checking in
Mhm.
when you stabilize your blood sugar, your mood is more stable and like shifting from there. I
Mhm.
think that's one thing I feel like in the medical world isn't always done, right? It's just like, there you go.
Yeah.
and
Take this.
then talk to you when I see,
Yeah.
you know?
It's also just such a different belief system, right? In medicine, you're taught essentially that the disease starts the day you figure out what it is as the doctor and give the diagnosis, as opposed to these are decades long habits and exposures that we're all having. And I think to me, if there's any take home that women would have from our conversation, from my perspective, it's like if you're going through health symptoms, if you're going through struggles in your body, it's not your fault. You're not broken. You didn't do anything wrong. And I think that is something that we can really internalize also from both conventional medicine, like it's your bad habits or your bad genes, or from wellness, like you're just not doing it enough. You're not doing the intermittent fasting enough. You're
Mm.
not eating enough plants. You're not meditating enough. You're not doing the right things enough. Rather than looking at it's like we live in a very complex world. And what are the things that we can do to kind of like nurture ourselves and support ourselves, eliminate the things that are overwhelming our systems, and nurture ourselves with the things that feed us well. And not just food, but all the things.
Ah, it's so true. And shifting that to the birth conversation
Mhm.
because you are the ultimate birth empowerer.
Mm, thank you.
It's true. And I think so many women feel their power is given over to the medical
Yeah,
system when they're especially in that vulnerable place of giving
yeah.
birth and maybe they don't have a doula or a midwife and they're being told certain things and just hearing how much knowledge you've shared
Mm,
to really put the power back into our own hands.
yeah. It's such a complicated world, the obstetric world, in the sense that we are really vulnerable. And you know, as a mom, and I know as a mom
Mm.
and a grandmom, I mean, I would be like, I would stand in front of a mother bear if I had to,
Oh,
like for my kids,
oh
right?
yeah.
I mean, you would do anything to protect them. And so if you're in labor and someone is saying, if you don't do this, well, do you want this to happen to your baby? Which is said, we know there's a huge misabuse of power happening in the obstetric world right now, leading to like anywhere between 7 and 15% of women who birth in the US right now being able to be actually diagnosed with PTSD, and up to 30% of women saying they've experienced birth trauma, like some psychological or physical thing that happened
Hmm.
at the hands of the conventional medical model that left them feeling actually psychologically traumatized. So the first thing is we have to give ourselves grace. We have got to give ourselves grace and not second guess anything about what we did or didn't do. It's the same with all the rest of it. Like, not that you didn't eat well enough or do this enough. When you're in that moment and you're birthing in a hospital, and the hospital is going to protect its risk management and bottom line at all. And I'm not saying this from a conspiratorial, jaded perspective. I'm saying this as a family doctor trained in obstetrics, having practiced obstetrics in a hospital. The bottom line is the bottom line. It's the hospital doesn't want to be sued. And that means primarily healthy baby, secondarily healthy mom, and the hospital's bottom line of costs. And these are very, very real factors that come into play. I mean, I was literally taught the words in medical school, well, in my residency. The only cesarean you get sued for is the one you didn't do. There's so much pressure to do these procedures and
Hmm.
operations. And now you're pregnant and you're having contractions and they're intense and you're having this kind of psychedelic and like an endogenously created psychedelic experience because your hormones are like, you're high in labor, right?
Mm.
It's just a natural thing. We get these altered perceptions. And somebody's telling you at the height of a contraction, if you don't have you don't have a cesarean, your baby's gonna blah, 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 blah,
I had two
based on the
cesarean.
monitor. Of course you're going to have it. It's like, take my right arm too if you need it for
Mm,
my babies. So I think if that's happened to anyone, whether it was if it was a necessary cesarean, of course, I mean, you did what you needed to do.
mhm,
But even at the end of the day, if you look back on it and you're learning about unnecessary cesareans and you're not sure yours was, or you think yours wasn't, it was because you made the choice to protect your babies at that moment. And that's all that matters. And
mm,
like, you're an amazing mama and give yourself grace. That is like the only thing. And at the same time, it's up to people like me who are now moms of grown kids and grandmothers to fight the battle to change it. You shouldn't have to fight that battle when you're in labor.
mm.
Sadly, sometimes you do. And that's hopefully where your doula or a partner can come in, or you have the most amazing OB or family doctor in the world who's really like all about helping you birth physiologically and innately if you don't need interventions. It's also about educating women about working with midwives because as midwives, we don't have the same statistics. Like, we don't have unnecessary cesarean sections for the most part. We don't have unnecessary epidurals and episiotomies and all the things. So, finding yourself a midwife is really important if you can. Um, and then just really getting educated, getting educated. Figure out what you really do and you really don't want. Because we might have people listening who are like, what is she talking about? I want an epidural. I'm like not thinking about anything else. And
Right.
it's like, all power to you. Also, I'm scheduled to have a C-section because I'm having triplets. Do it.
Mm.
Like, whatever the reason is, make the choice that's actually most aligned with what you need, but also what feels right to you and what you want. And that might be like squatting in your bathroom with your partner and your sister and your midwife, or it might be choosing that C-section. It's all good, but know the choice. Like, know the implications, know what you need to ask, know what you need to look for, know when things are going well, know when things aren't, and get comfortable advocating for yourself. And that's really hard for women because we're not taught to speak up for ourselves and we're not taught at the end of the day to push against authority. And medical authority will often push back.
Oh, yeah,
And so that's tricky.
it really
Yeah,
is. Did you home birth your grandkids?
I did. You know what? With all the things that people say are my accomplishments, the thing that I'm most proud of, but most like honored about and delighted about is that I got to be the midwife for my grandchildren. And it's a little bit of story because my daughter-in-law is actually a Harvard-trained pediatrician with a Harvard master's degree in public health. So talk about like conservative training. And and we've talked about this story publicly, so I'm not disclosing anything Sylvia wouldn't want me to disclose. We have a podcast about this. But when she was pregnant with Ari, our oldest grandkid, who's 12, Sylvia went into the conventional model, started getting prenatal care from an OB, and was really not feeling like she was being heard and cared for the way she wanted to. So then she switched to a birthing center model, but there were some issues that came up with misinterpretation of reading her lab work that the midwives, because they were certified nurse midwives in a birthing center associated with a hospital,
Mhm.
were then obligated to deal with in a certain way. So she came to me and asked me what I thought. And it was actually really funny because I could tell she was like, this is my mother-in-law. And yes, she's a Yale-trained MD and she's a family doctor with obstetrics, but she's still kind of hippie and alternative, right? Like, yes, this is the nice suit, but I'm like super hippie and alternative as well as the New Yorker who likes to put it on. And so she said, well, what do you think? And I could tell she was like trusting me, but still needing more validation.
Mm.
So I said, well, let me email so and so. And when I said so and so, she was like, this is one of the world's leading maternal fetal medicine specialists. And she said, you can email so and so. And I said his first name. And she said, and you know him by first name? I'm like, yeah, he was my advisor on my senior thesis in medical school. Like, he's asked me to consult for something for his company. Like, yeah. So I emailed him the information, and it was about some thyroid labs in her pregnancy. And he emailed me back within the hour. And she was like, all right, I don't even care what the answer is, but she kind of needed that validation. But once she had it, that I fit her like safety model of
Mhm.
information, she relaxed and she had these beautiful home births with both my grandbabies. So yeah, I got to midwife them and they love to say, "You held us first after mom in her belly." And they're 12 and 9.
That's
Yeah.
so sweet.
Yeah.
What and at home?
At home. Yeah, at home.
In, like, a water birth
So
or
with her first baby, she did water in labor and then birthed on land, as I say. And, with the second baby, she did land birth, but she did hypnobirthing, and
Oh, yeah.
she loved it. She I have pictures of her, like, in labor like this, like, in a chair.
Wow.
And, yeah, so she's an amazing, powerful, incredible human being and, co-captain of a boat with my son. They live on a boat now,
Wow.
and their 2 kids, they've just done, half their Pacific crossing, and it's a whole story. He created a healthcare company for, communities that just don't have access and,
Mm.
is now working from a boat, homeschooling his kids.
Wow.
So, yeah,
So
yeah.
beautiful.
And I've midwifed one of my nephews. One of my other nephews had his kids at home. So and I actually, was the first person to hold my godson, but he was born by C-section, and sometimes it's just needed, and I was there with her. It was not a planned home birth, it was a planned hospital birth, and it was just an important and
Right.
necessary cesarean. Yeah.
I had 2 C-sections, and I think even just hearing you say that, it gives you just this feeling of like, "Listen, you do the best that you can,"
Yeah.
and it's such a vulnerable place to be in when you're
Mhm.
being told,
Yeah.
"Baby's heart rate's dropping," like, "This is getting severe." It's
Yeah.
scary.
It's
It's
terrifying. I
terrifying.
mean, it's terrifying on my side of it as a physician because I know, like, you don't wanna go to sleep at night with a loss like that
Yeah.
happening. Like, we live that stuff too. We want the best outcomes, and then there's all the pressure of, like, "Okay, that heart tone dropped a little bit. Let's just do the C-section." There's a lot of pressure on physicians to do that too, and so it's a very complicated
Mm.
moment, and I think we do and there's no way to know.
Right.
Most babies, when the heart tones drop on the monitor, babies actually turned out to be fine, like 90% or more turned out to be fine. But you'd rather be second guessing on the side of caution than second
Right.
guessing on the side of loss, and that makes it really tricky. So it's hard, right? Like, there's all this information about the rising maternal mortality rates and the overuse of C-section, and we know all these things. And then at the end of the day, like, I have this program called Mama Pathway online, and I teach this whole like, I keep coming back to surrender and flow. And look, you have kids.
Hmm.
We can do all the things. We can have the home birth, the breastfeeding, the family bed. You can do the C-section, the perfect everything. And your kid may still end up with eczema
Right.
or allergies or depression as a teenager or like a tonsillectomy. Who knows? Like what ADHD, like
Right.
any of the things. And so I think we do what we can to be responsible, to live our best life, to make the best choices. And then we sort of have to live our lives rising to the occasions that
Mm.
happen with grace too, right?
Absolutely. I remember feeling like I failed.
Mhm.
I was so depressed.
Yeah.
I
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way anymore
Mhm.
because, well, I thought I wasn't strong enough. Like, I was like,
Mhm.
"I thought I'm so strong. What? Like, am I just not able to do this?" Like,
Yeah.
I just felt like I couldn't figure like, I was like, "I can't." It's just I
Yeah.
really struggled. But it's important, I think, for anyone to just really take in exactly what you said. Like,
Yeah.
this is all it is
We just keep
it's
living and
so much,
learning.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, the surrender
Yes.
to it all.
And it's the same as I was talking about the evolutionary mismatch. I mean, like, we don't live the way women lived 100 years ago, and we're expecting ourselves to birth in environments that are not conducive
Mm,
to physiologic birth, which is why midwives have such greatly different outcomes, which is why in countries where birth is normalized as a healthy life experience, women don't have the same level of pressures, but also complications that
yeah.
we're just sort of baked into here on some level. And that's why,
Mm.
again, giving ourselves grace. And
Ugh,
if your baby's born in distress, I mean, you did the best thing. Like, I always say to my patients, to people I know, my people who my students, everyone, it's like, if natural, if you will, worked all the time, we'd still be, like, all having our babies in the field. We'd all be only having herbs, but we'd also be dying of catastrophic infections and catastrophic injuries. I mean, there is a reason
Mhm.
that we also evolved to have antibiotics and hormone therapies. It's just cesareans, all the things. It's just unfortunate that it's very hard to sometimes decipher when we do and don't need things because we know that there's profit motive baked into all of those things. There are legalistic issues baked into all of those things. We don't always know what to trust and who to trust for the alternative information, if you will, and
Mm,
it's a lot.
it is. You are I just admire you so much and feel like everyone is going to walk away from listening to this
No.
conversation just feeling good and feeling okay, with the choices that they're making and knowing that it may be what you need in that moment and just reducing as much shame and guilt and carrying the weight of that energy
Yeah.
with us into everything
And where's
that
the
we
shame and
do.
guilt coming from? Like, are we thinking other people are looking at us? Like, because if our friends and community are judging us for doing the thing, I mean, I've had women come up to me and say they got shamed in an online natural birth community because they had a C-section or an epidural.
Yeah.
It's
I
like,
was going to say it's
are we just
honestly
in the
people
wrong
in that
groups
it's
sometimes?
people in those yeah.
Yeah, or like if you do need an antidepressant or you
Right.
do need hormone therapy. And in my practice, I always go to the least like, I don't prescribe pharmaceuticals that often. I will when they're needed. There's so much we can do between here and there.
Mm.
But the shame and the blame and the self-judgment, all of us, like myself included, how do we just let go of that and
Yeah.
love ourselves where we are? Like, when does that start, you know?
Yes. Well, that's the beauty of the work that you do. I
Mm.
feel like it just spreads like in every message, in every program. Can you share with everyone where they can find you, purchase all of your books
Oh,
and
wow.
your book to come and just I think the programs, like people are going to
Yeah.
be very interested
Okay,
in.
great. Yes. So there's the places to find me are on Instagram. That is the social platform that I have the most bandwidth for. So I am
Same.
really in there with I've tried TikTok. I'm like, oh, I can't keep up with all of it. So Instagram is me. Come hang out with me there. And that content, if you're a Facebook lover, it's shared on content and other places. But Instagram's where I'm hanging out in the comments and the DMs and all the things.
And it's Dr.
Dr.
Aviva
Aviva, yeah, Romm.
Romm.
And then my website. I mean, there's so much free information,
Mm.
articles,
You give so
podcasts,
much
all
for
of it.
free.
Yeah, there's tons. Like, I really am about democratizing information and just helping you to find what you need. So it's not like, check out this article and I'm going to give you a breadcrumb, but then you have to buy all these things. It's like, I have had women who have gotten pregnant after years of struggling with fertility challenges just with my PCOS blog. It's like
Mm.
the information is there. My books, Hormone Intelligence was the instant New York Times
You
bestseller you mentioned, and that book is like end to end for any woman between starting menstruation and perimenopause. Adrenal Thyroid Revolution, which isn't my favorite title, but that
oh,
book
I like
is
it.
you do. That book is
Yes.
for everything: overwhelm, burnout, whether you have an adrenal or thyroid problem or not. But if you
Most people
think you
do.
do, or you're one of the 1 in 8 women who actually has a thyroid problem, or you're not sure,
Mm.
both of those books are like, here's how to assess your symptoms. Because I know, like, you can go 7, 10 years with endometriosis and not get a diagnosis, 5 years
Mm.
with an autoimmune condition and not get a diagnosis. So those books have the checklist you need to kind of like, do I need to get medical help? What labs do I need for all the different things? And then end to end protocols. It's like, it's what I created that kind of takes as much as possible what I do in my practice and translates it into books. My programs, my 2 biggest programs, I have a practitioner program, the Women's Integrative Functional Medicine Certification, and that is like a graduate degree in women's health. It's the only program like that. And
Wow.
it's everything from autoimmune to metabolism, root cause medicine, gut health, all the things. And that you do need to be a practitioner
Mm.
of someone, a health coach, acupuncturist, mental health provider, MD, CNM, whatever, for that program. Then I have a course
How long is that?
that is a 16-month program. It's 10 months intensive working with me. It's very doable. And it has all kinds of continuing education, continuing medical, health coach, nutrition, RD. It's an amazing program. I love that program. And it's only, you can register between March and September, and then the cohort starts together. Herbal medicine for women is really for any practitioner, but also any woman who wants a very deep dive into herbal medicine and natural medicine for reproductive health. So, menstruation through menopause. We don't go into all of like autoimmune disease and common illnesses. It's really everything: PCOS, hormones, endometriosis, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
And those are great complementary courses. Then I have the Mama Pathway, which is a community membership experience, and it's all things preconception through postpartum and early motherhood for mamas. And it's these different programs. And then with it, this beautiful online community. Love. And then I have some other courses that we periodically launch, like my 28-day gut reset. And there's more coming. And then the big book reveal is a menopause book. It won't be out until spring of 2026, but I'm working on that now. So it's really exciting. And then my practice, I see patients too. So
Mm. And people can find you on your website for that.
yes, they can find me on my website.
Okay.
And that's just a telemedicine experience, although we're
Mm.
building out some group clinical experiences for 2025, which I'm really excited about. So like menopause
Mm.
group, fertility
Oh,
group, so people
smart.
can do on, journeys together, which I think community is so important in these different journeys in our life.
Very,
Yeah,
very. Community is everything. I
it is
think connecting with
everything.
the like-minded people
Yes,
wherever
knowing
you
you're
are
not
in life,
alone. Yeah, getting tips and ideas of what works for other women.
you make the world a better place. And your energy,
Oh,
can I
you
just say, when you
too.
walked into the office, even Dylan came over, she's like, her energy, it's
Oh,
so beautiful and pure and uplifting.
thank
And
you.
it just, you feel the purity of your
Mm.
soul, and like your mission in life is to really just help people.
It is. I actually wake up and think every time I try to write, I try to remind myself, look, my mind goes on the spin too, like, oh, like, I don't have enough of this. I don't have enough
Hmm.
Instagram. I got
Yeah.
to do this. I got to grow more. But then when I get down to it, I have this sort of inner mantra of like, can I create things that at the other end, a woman is saying, this made my life better. This made me feel better. This made me feel less alone. This brought me some joy and delight. This brought me some hope. So that is actually how we try to create.
Well, you are doing that. That's
Thank
how
you. Well,
so
back
many
at
of
you,
us, I
sister.
feel. Thank
Oh,
you so much. I'm so happy to have you here.
thank you.